Hi, I'm Paul, professional baker. I'm here today at RFK Kitchens. I'm going to show you how to make a focaccia. Nice rustic Italian bread, delicious and actually deceptively simple to make. So what I'm going to do to start with is I've got 250 grams of warmish water. Before I put the flour in, actually I'm going to add salt and then the flour. I've then got some instant yeast, so that's quick yeast. Now this dough is really wet, really sticky. So before I get my hand in there and start coating everything in battery dough, what I want to do is use my scraper first. When you first mix this, if your hand gets wet, you coat your hand in flour. Cutting round with the scraper, trying to get all the dry bits of the dough. So sooner or later, there's no hiding it. You have to get your hand in there, no avoiding it. So one hand first, you can see close up on that, it's nice and sticky, nice and wet. I'm just going to, with my hand, just beat it and scrunch it. So my hand's actually performing like a dough mixer and actually just whipping around there. You could do this in a mixer if you have one. So you can see this dough's really sticky and wet. That's what gives the focaccia its characteristic lightness and bubbles. So if I do want to add a little bit more water, rather than tip it in, what I can do is just dunk my hand into a bit of water and then combine it that way. We're nearly there now. So what I've got here is I've got 50 grams of olive oil in my tray. So this is the tray I'm actually going to bake the focaccia in. You can see that. But I like to measure that out into there and then I can use it just to dip the dough in and dip my hands in if I need it. So now this dough is pretty much ready. You can see it's nice and sloppy. I'm going to drop that into the olive oil. And then I'm going to clean the bowl out. So again, my scraper comes in handy here. This is the kind of dough, I think if you made this at home and followed a recipe, you might think you've done something wrong and put too much water in or measured something wrong because it's really wet and sticky. You can't really see how it's going to form a decent loaf of bread. You just have to stick with it. Now the advantage of dipping my dough in here is that it's now got a nice little coating of oil. So when I put it back in the bowl, there's going to be oil in between the dough and the bowl, which means I can move it around when I need to. So I've just folded it over on itself and I'm dropping it back in there. And all this oil is going to be absorbed by the dough. And that's it for now. So that's the first bit done. No kneading, no vigorous kneading or turning out onto a table or anything. It's quite low mess really. It all stays in the bowl. It's only your hand that gets messy. And that's going to sit there for 20 minutes and then we'll do the next stage. One thing that's going to make making bread at home a lot easier is one of these Neff ovens. So if I fire it up, this has actually got a built-in steam function. Slot that in. There's one comes up here with a loaf, which is bread baking. If I go a little, which we'll use later, which is again another brilliant function. This one's dough proving. I'm going to do this for about 10 minutes, I think. And then click start on that. Start to get that steam being generated. And then I'll just pop it down on this level here. And that can just sit in there until I need it again. So after the initial mixing, this dough's just sat for 20 minutes and that's time for it to ferment. So for the yeast to wake up and start to produce carbon dioxide, which we need. Okay, so that was just a 5-minute mixing. Now we go into the first fold. So I want to just, again, one hand, I just want to get some oil on my hand, try and keep that dough off. So just free it up from around the bowl. And now I'm going to do something different because what I love about bread making is that I can do something different every time. So I'm actually going to put a few leaves of fresh basil before I fold it. Some fresh basil going in there. Now the fold is really key, especially if you're making bread by hand. Doing this first fold and second fold transforms the dough. So what I do is I take the side of the dough, stretch it, you can see how loose and stretchy it is, and then tuck it into the middle. I take the opposite side and tuck it into the middle, and then I'm doing all 4 sides. So then this one, and that one. Now this dough is starting to stand up by itself. We're tightening it up and we've got those fresh basil leaves sandwiched in there as well, just for something different. Okay, so after the first fold on the dough, I'm going to pop it back into my dough proving function in the oven. Got my nice little slide and hide door here. Pop that in there and then leave it in that nice warm moist environment. The yeast is going to love it in there. So I'll come back to it in 20 minutes and do the second fold. Really quick stage this, second fold. So out of my dough proving from the oven. Again, oil on my hands and take all this dough off the scraper now. This dough is super light and airy. That dough proving function, those conditions in there just mean that it proves so much quicker. So free the dough up from the side of the bowl. Pull it up, opposite side. Over the top, so that's all four sides that I'm doing. So airy and light now, it's crazy. So this isn't going to be another 15 minutes or so. We're going to be ready to put this into the tin. The last stage, the proving stage. Done. It's starting to fight me now, so it's starting to keep the shape it wants to keep, so that's time to stop. I don't want to do it too much where the dough starts to tear because it doesn't want to do what it's told. So I'm just going to flip it over, last stage. A bit more oil, and then it can go back into the oven. So this focaccia has had 2 folds and now it's ready to get into the tray. So taking it out of the dough proving function, it's super lively, super airy and bubbly. We'll see that when I lift it up. Oil on my hands, use this scraper. We're not going to fold it or anything this time, we're just going to try and like lift it out straight into the tray. Make sure there's oil all around the outside. And bosh, in we go. So don't worry about stretching this out into the corners because we're going to add the tomatoes now, and when we do it will naturally fill the corners anyway and that dough will spread out. What I want to do is push them quite hard down into the dough. This dough is going to act like a big trampoline. If we're not careful, as it rises it's going to kick everything off the top and all our tomatoes are going to end up around the edge. So I actually press it nicely down. I want to make kind of pockets. These tomatoes are going to kind of slow roast in their own juice. They're going to fill with flavour, so just pushing those down almost right through to the base actually. I know almost about it, you can go right the way through. Nearly there. So we want to fill this up. 9 baby plum tomatoes for those that are interested. Next, some rosemary. I like to use the tops of the rosemary, this fresh bit, and I don't need to chop it. Scatter that across. It's about right for rosemary. You can use as much or as little of this as you want. So back into our dough proving. Because this dough is super airy and light, it's probably only going to need 10 minutes before we bake it. So I'll set that 10 minutes, then I can get cleaned up and then we're ready to go again. Our focaccia is pretty much ready now. So it's time to take it out from the dough proving. Pop it on the side, it'll be fine for a minute. That gives us a chance to warm up our oven, get our oven ready to bake with. I'm going to switch from the dough proving function, then I can flick through. Now, a major limitation with people baking great bread at home is that their oven's just not up to scratch. This one is specifically designed to bake great bread. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some steam on. So I'm going to give it steam for the first part of the bake. So if I flick through, I'm going to go for medium steam, 220, and then I'm just going to let that warm up, and then that focaccia is ready to go in. So we'll come back to it in a minute. Our focaccia is ready for the oven. So the last little detail is some molten sea salt, so nice little delicate salt crystals. Just a sprinkling of those, and then I'm going to transfer it to the oven. Pop it into there. Then I'm going to give this 10 minutes on steam, so I can set that on the oven so I know where I am. I can leave it there, and then I'll take the steam off. So 10 minutes of steam have happened, so it's time to take the steam off and go for a dry heat just for the rest of the cooking time. So just click the steam button, scant it off, and then that'll take all the steam out. Just get rid of that last bit of steam. And then I've got a dry heat just to crisp up the crust now. Our focaccia is done. I've baked it quite well. I like that crust to be nice and crispy. So you can bake it as you want. If you want it a bit lighter, then turn the oven down halfway through the cooking process to about 200. So here he is. You can see those nice salt crystals on there. So fresh out the oven. One little check I can do just to see is what that base looks like. So if it's nice and golden and springy, we know we're in business. If I want to see what the inside looks like now, it's nice and hot, so I'll have to watch the steam. You can hear that sound. Look at this crusty, beautiful, fluffy focaccia. Just little pockets of kind of slow roasted tomatoes in the middle. With the salt on top, just give it that burst of flavour. And then we've got all that steam coming out, that's spot on, that is. I want to eat it right now.